All right, so let's get right to the fasting. And we did a conversion, so if some of the slides are funky, so I apologize if they are. But the F word. My initial thoughts on fasting were, why would you do that to yourself? And in fact, I saw fast as this. That's how I saw it. Anybody else agree? Does it feel like that, maybe? My biggest thing was, why would you do that to yourself? Why would you make yourself so hungry? Why would you go without food? That made no sense to me at all. But in 2006, as I started interviewing people on the Live and La Vida Low Carb show, I actually talked to Dr. Mike Eads quite a bit. He wrote Protein Power. Anybody read Protein Power? A couple of you. So he started talking about this concept called IF. And IF stands for intermittent fasting. And he said, you just go a period of time without eating. And again, I was like, why? That makes no sense, Mike. I was like talking to him, and I couldn't wrap my head around why you would ever do that. So it was 3 years later, I interviewed this gentleman, Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He's a very famous cancer researcher with ketogenic diets. And I interviewed him on my show in episode 302. And at the very end, this was just a great interview, and at the very end, he just threw in kind of an afterthought. He said, if you want to ward off cancer, do a 1 week fast once a year. 1 week fast once a year. That seems doable. But I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Before I could wrap my head around doing a week fast, I probably should try this intermittent fasting again. So I tried it, and my first attempt was like that. Exactly 4 days, 19 hours, and 15 minutes, and it felt like an eternity. It was rough. And this is what I discovered after that first fasting experience. I noticed I was still severely addicted to caffeine. I was still drinking diet sodas at the time. I've since come off of those, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. Number two, I felt like what it was hungry to be hungry again. I really didn't know what that was on my low-carb diet. You're pretty hunger satiated all the time, right? Well, not when you're fasting. It's pretty rough. I realized the importance of fueling my workouts. I did try to keep the workouts up during the fasting, intermittent fasting. I now know what it means to be ravenously hungry, and then going without food for a long period of time is difficult. Now keep in mind, this was my initial foray into any fasting ever in my life. Okay? So that's what that was like. So I gave it a few more years where I was like, okay, that was fun, but no. And in 2011, Rob Wolf, there on the screen, and people like Brad Pilon, I'd interviewed more people. They said, you got to try this fasting some more. I was like, okay. The important thing that really changed it for me was when I went full on ketogenic. I found I could naturally fast upwards of 18 to 24 hours without even thinking about it. Anybody can attest to that? Yeah. So intermittent fasting is so super duper dippity doo easy when you're ketogenic. And we'll talk about that towards the end. So what about that 1 week fast? All right, now that I have it dialed in, and I've been ketogenic full-time since 2012 and easily intermittent fast, well, what about doing what Dr. Seyfried had mentioned with the 1 week fast? I'm going to skip this slide, but it's basically one of my followers who sent me their experience doing fasting. I'm trying to save some time here, so we'll skip this. All right, so as I was becoming interested in extended fasting, I also was interested in ketosis, and I find that the two go together like bacon and eggs, and bacon and eggs happen to be keto. So I do this. April 10th through the 17th, 2011, I decided to dive right into doing a 1 week fast. I just wanted to see how I'd feel doing it. Really nothing fancy about it. So I felt kind of spacey until day 4 or 5. And I had great energy after that. Now, the thing that ruined me was I'm a Christian, and at church that day, we had communion. Not smart to take a little wafer of carbohydrate and a little glass of carbohydrate when you've had no food for a week. And yet I did, and I paid the consequences. I had bad hypoglycemia, and my wife thought I was dying. So blood sugars, though, throughout the fast were lower than normal, and that was okay. There was considerable weight loss, 6 kilo. I did play competitive volleyball and some yoga that week. during the fast, no problems whatsoever. We're going to skip real quick over the bathroom. It was interesting. I took my regular supplements, but probably didn't need to, which you'll hear about in a minute. I used diet soda to endure the fast, and that probably was not wise. And then people will misunderstand why you're fasting, and your job is to ignore them. So I asked Dr. Seyfried, what's he think about the results I had? And so here is what he said. He said taking the vitamins probably sent mixed signals to the body. Didn't really need to do that. A cancer fighting fast, he said, probably should have just been distilled water, and I did water and diet soda. Bless you. The weight loss during a 7-day fast, he said, is mostly water weight where you're dumping glycogen stores. There's only minor protein loss if your stored fat is mobilized, and you would assume that it was, the fact that I was feeling so good. He lamented I didn't test blood ketones, but keep in mind, this was 2011. I didn't learn about blood ketones in earnest till I read the Volek and Finney book talking about testing it in 2012, 1 year later. And then he suspected that my blood ketones were high enough that probably helped me endure the fast. So he actually wrote a book about it called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. Anybody read this book? It's $125 US. So even I didn't spend that much money on it. But he did put me in the book in my 1 week fast that crashed and burned on Communion Day. Thank you very much. All right. So I wanted to give some kudos to these two gentlemen. You know who they are. They're Jeff Volek and Steve Finney. And I think they deserve a round of applause for all that they're doing to really promote this, because I think I wouldn't be able to articulate a lot of what I talk about without the work that they've put in. And I know Jeff stands on the shoulders of them, as does Rod and everyone who's kind of a part of this community. Like I said, I did read that book, and it taught me about doing ketosis, and it showed me I could intermittent fast very naturally, and did and do. Now the problem is our culture tells us to always eat. We have breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack, midnight snack. In fact, there's a restaurant chain in America called Taco Bell. They call the midnight snack the fourth meal. Sorry, Taco Bell, I don't even eat 3 meals, much less your fourth meal, and definitely not all those snacks. So is this starting to sound like an F word anymore to anybody? Anybody still skeptical? Okay, thank you very much. No, I'm just kidding. So what happens if you get hungry while on a fast? Hello, McFly, you eat something. It's not rocket science. Last year in South Africa, I had the privilege of sharing a stage with this gentleman, Dr. Jason Fung. Anybody know Dr. Fung's work? Great. He and I just wrote a book together, which I'll tell you about here in a minute, but I got him the book with my publisher, and I said, you know what, we're going to be writing a book about this. Let me experience what it's like to fast some of these longer term. Since intermittent fasting was very easy for me, I said, I want to try a 21-day fast. Anybody ever tried 21 days? What's the longest? 3 days? 7 days? 10 days? Most of you like 3, 4? All right, so I said, I want to do 21 days. And he said, okay, are you crazy? No, he said, I'll help you out. So in September last year, my goal was to fast for 21 days in a row, and my protocol was this: water, bone broth with sea salt, and that was important for me because I found that during my fasting before, that when I didn't add salt, I would get major cramps and headaches, and yeah, a lot of you are nodding your heads. So bone broth was a nice facilitator for getting that in my body, the sea salt. And bone broth is so low in calories, you're barely getting anything. It's mostly water anyway. And then the last component is kombucha. Anybody drink kombucha in here? Yeah, it's good for your gut health. So during the fast, I wanted to keep that up. Now, since I've been fasting, I found I probably don't need the kombucha because your gut health actually naturally stays pretty stable even during a fast. So I might, with future fasts, cut that out. But for the purposes of this fast, I did add it. Total energy intake was less than 200 calories a day. And while it's not technically a fast, it's water only, Dr. Fung said if you can make it through a fast, you're getting the benefits from it, which is why I did it that way. And then I shared daily updates on my Periscope channel. Anybody follow Jimmy Scopes? 2 of you, thank you. All right, so how did it go? Day 1 was extremely easy. Why? Because I was already used to intermittent fasting. 18 to 24 hours very naturally. So day 1 was like, yeah, that was nothing. Day 2, though, was hell. Can anybody attest to that? That when you're fasting, that second and third day-ish can be really hard, and you'll find you have an intense desire to eat that pushes, but it wasn't hunger, and I knew that. And so I pressed on. I actually had an extra cup of the bone broth with the sea salt, and that helped to suppress some of that. But by day 3, something truly incredible happened. I felt amazing. And you wouldn't think that having not eaten for 3 days, but you really get this kind of sense of nirvana that comes on you, and it's pretty awesome. And fasting beyond the first few days was incredibly easy. Remember, my goal was 21 days. And so if you get that kind of positive reinforcement early on, you're like, hey, I can do this. I felt more normal by day 4 than usual. My blood ketones had shot up well above 3, while my blood sugar dropped to 70s, which is 4 millimolar, below 4 millimolar for you guys. And what's interesting about that is people freak out about their blood sugar going down, but it makes sense. You don't need the blood sugar. The blood ketones are actually stepping in the place of the blood sugar for your energy at that point. I found I had a lot more time to concentrate on other things because I wasn't having to constantly think about food. I actually saved a couple of weeks worth of grocery bills too, so that was kind of cool. So did I make it 21 days? Well, no, but 17 and a half days. It's not bad, right? So what was the saboteur? Stress. Ouch. We started traveling. Chrissy and I went and met some friends at the beach, and so we traveled, and it was happy stress, but it was stress. And I have a theory that when you're insulin resistant, you're probably stress resistant as well. It's kind of a working theory. I'm really working on the stress aspect in my life. And what do? Travel halfway around the world to see you guys. But I am working on that to see if I can get that under control. And if I can ever figure that out, I will write a book called Stress Clarity. So still got to figure it out. But this was still 3 times longer than any other fast I'd ever done. I did lose a total of 9 kilo during that 17 and a half days of fasting. I kept off 7 kilo 1 month later when I tested, because everybody's like, well, you just lose water weight and you gain it all back. Well, I kept off a majority of that 1 month later. Now, some of the interesting markers that I checked, and not that I think they matter, but they matter to some people. Total cholesterol dropped 100 points in American terms. That's 2.6 millimolar. Huge drop. No drugs, 17 and a half days of just not eating, and I dropped it 2.6 millimolar. And with the lack of fat consumption, HDL, you would assume would go down, and it did, but just slightly, 0.25 millimolar. But it was the LDL-C that represented the greatest reduction, and it was down 2 millimolar. Amazing. No statin drug can do that quickly, and yet not eating can, at least in me. Now, some of the more advanced testing that you can't have done here, but in America there's this one called an NMR lipoprofile test. Jeff told you about the particle size. So this is the one, it's a little hard to see, but it says LDLP. That's the total number of LDL particles. They dropped 43% in that 17 and a half days. Small LDLP, which is the truly atherogenic kind, they fell 59% in the 17 and a half days. Lipoprotein little a is another key heart health marker, 68% drop. All I did was not eat, guys. This is no drug. This is nothing fancy schmancy. It's just fasting that gave all these incredible results. Now, fasting insulin and hsCRP, which is a key inflammation marker, also improved. And I consider this a great success testing the concept of extended fasting. But guess what? I wasn't done. I wanted to learn more. After that, I was like, I need to learn some more about doing these fasts. So I did another experiment in October of 2015, and it was for 1 week. I ended up losing 6 kilo, but when I tested 1 month later, it was all back on. I was like, 1 week's not enough for somebody like me, and I'm obviously very insulin resistant, and so maybe the more insulin resistant you are, the better these longer fasts will work for you. So then I said, it's okay to change things up. Let's try in December another kind of fast. So I thought, let's try a cyclical fast. So 17 and a half days, 21 days in a row, that can sound intimidating to a lot of people. Does it intimidate you guys to think about even trying to do that? So I said, okay, let's try fasting for 6 days, and then eat on the 7th, fast another 5 days, eat on the 13th day, fast for another 4 days, and then end the fast. So basically the same 17-ish days that I did in September, but yet breaking it up with a meal. Because if you know you got a meal coming up this weekend, you're like, okay, I can fast until then, and then you have, a whole day worth of eating and then get back on it again. So I said, let's see if that does anything. So my purpose was to see if I would see the same benefits. I did lose 8 kilos during that time period, but I only kept off 5 pounds of that, so about 2 kilos of that. Blood sugar and blood ketones were all over the board though. The times I was fasting, they were good. And obviously when I'm eating ketogenic. It wasn't like I had crappy carbs. And I found that it was a lot less stable when I was on the feeding days. So then the controversy came into play earlier this year when I decided in January that I wanted to try a 31-day fast. Yeah, when I approached Dr. Fung about this, he said, really? I said, yeah, I want to give it a go because, we're talking about in our book about how people should be doing some of these longer fasts, especially the ones with insulin resistance. And so I thought, I want to know what it's like to try to do that. So my protocol there, my goal was to make it 31 days in a row of fasting. All my previous fasting that I had done up to that point said, you know what, I can probably give this a good go and give it the old college try, as they say. Now, some people were concerned about muscle loss. Now, I can see the bubbles above a lot of your head. Did you lose muscle during these fasts? Anybody have concerns about that? All right. So I did a DEXA scan. So that's a scan that will measure your lean tissue, your body fat, and it also does bone density. But I just did it for the first two. For this thing. So I did it before and after the fast, and we'll get to more of that in a minute. I used the same protocol, water, bone broth, sea salt, and kombucha during the fast. Blood sugar levels fell into the 3.5 to 4.0 millimolar, very good levels, very quickly. I had no signs of hypoglycemia because remember, the ketones step in the place of that blood sugar. So again, you have full energy despite having lower blood sugars. Your doctor would probably go, are you okay? But he doesn't understand the ketones are helping. Ketones remained around 2.5 millimolar on daily average throughout the fast. I had awesome energy levels and felt wonderful, mental enhancement, all the things you would expect from having high levels of ketones, and they are a hallmark of an extended fast. So it's not exactly the same as nutritional ketosis, but pretty darn close. So in day 11, I decided, you know what, I'm rolling here. Let's see what's going on every hour on the hour. And yes, my poor fingers, I was sitting there like, I need a continuous blood glucose and continuous blood ketone meter so I can do this without feeling it. But these are the numbers. Sorry, again, on in American terms, but it was like 3.5 to 4 millimolar for the blood sugar. Steady blood glucose readings throughout the day. I averaged about 3.5 on the blood ketone meter, no hypoglycemia, and the kombucha and bone broth. I got a lot of complaints about this when I started talking about drinking kombucha and bone broth. Well, that's going to mess up your blood sugar and that's going to mess with your ketones. Did it? Not at all. And so I was pretty pleased with that. So here are the results. Day 13. Dun, dun, dun. What happened? I traveled. What happened? I got hungry. And so I had to stop the fast for one day. So I paused it. And I got right back on it the next day. And then we had to travel back home a few days later. So I stopped it again. And I found on those days when I had the stress, hunger, weakness, and a general feeling of blah. So there's no reason why you should push the envelope if you're feeling that way. Just eat at that point. Just eat. And I don't ignore that. In fact, I promised Christine I would not. I resumed the fast again when I got back home. I fasted 6 more days, had to pause it one day. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was some stressful something happened. And then I came off of it and did the final 9 days of January. So did I hit my goal of 31 days? No, but I did 28 of 31 days, which was pretty darn awesome. I did lose a total of 10 kilo, kept off 6 kilo 1 month later. Blood sugar, blood ketones were somewhat erratic around those travel times, but again, you would expect that. Cortisol raises blood sugar, kills your ketones. So what about the DEXA scan? I know you're interested in that, right? The after DEXA showed that I lost 10 pounds of body fat, but also 10 pounds of lean tissue. Uh-oh, did I lose muscle? So a lot of people did assume that it was muscle loss. But guess what, guys? None of the muscle loss was in my arms or my legs. In fact, during that 28 of 31 days, I gained muscle. Fasting, I gained muscle in my arms and my legs. All the muscle loss was what they call the trunk area, so the neck to the waist. That's where all of the muscle loss happened. So I talked to Dr. Fung about this. I said, how is it possible that I would gain muscle in the arms and legs and lose muscle in here? And he said, you know what? A DEXA scan can be flawed. It can actually mistake fat loss in the organs with muscle loss, and organ fat loss is a very good thing. So I said, you know what? Let me eat for a couple weeks. Let me go back on my ketogenic diet. And I ate for a couple weeks following my fast and went back for another DEXA scan. So what happened? Here are the results. All 10 pounds of that so-called muscle loss came back on the body again. Now, I'm no athlete. I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger. I can't put on that much muscle that quickly again. And so this was a really good lesson in knowing that these things are all tools. Blood sugar, blood ketone, DEXA scans, all of these things are just tools in the toolbox. We can't ever rely on them to be 100% accurate in showing exactly what's happening. And I suspect Dr. Fung was right in that since it was just in the trunk area, there was probably a lot of organ fat that was lost and not lean muscle. So I learned so much doing these experiments, and I just tell you, try it, tweak it, and make it work for you. And it's definitely your turn now. Anybody feel inspired to try a fast, at least intermittent fast? A couple of days, 2-3 days? Yeah. Thank you, because that would have not been good if you said no. Just kidding. And here's a progression. Feel free to take a screenshot of that if you'd like to. But here's a great progression if you want to try fasting. Number one, if you're not already eating ketogenic, eat ketogenic, because that's going to be the foundation for you doing well. Number two, cut out all your snacking during the day. So if you're currently having meal, snack, get the snacks out of your diet. And the way you do that is you eat more at the meals. So if you eat more, and definitely more fat at your meals, then you're able to go between meals without snacking. The reason you snack is you're still hungry, so you didn't eat enough. Number three, skip one meal you would otherwise eat. So lunch, for example, when you wake up in the morning, you have breakfast, skip the lunch, and then have dinner. That's another great way to fast. Then try to do it within a feeding window. So you've heard of like the 16-8 diet, right? So even push the window like 4 hours to 8 hours, and that lets you fast for 16 to 20 hours. Eat every other day. That's called alternate day fasting. Fast for 2 to 3 days, and then kind of see how you do feeling with that. And what you'll find is the more you do these even shorter fasts, it kind of motivates you. Well, let's see what happens if I go a little longer the next time. Then number 7, try fasting for a week. It won't kill you. I've done a few of them now. They're pretty awesome. And then the last one, if need be, if necessary, try fasting for extended periods. You know your situation, whether that would work for you and whether you need that or not. So give it a go. And that's a good little progression rather than just diving into, well, Jimmy said 21 days, so I'm going to go for it. No, he didn't. He said start at the foundation. They say don't try this at home, so go try it at your friend's house. So I alluded to this earlier. This is the book we're coming out with next month called The Complete Guide to Fasting. Dr. Jason Fung and I co-authored this. In fact, it hit number 2 on Amazon Canada last month. Harry Potter was the only one that beat it. Darn, Harry Potter kept us from number 1. But we'll have full details on all the intermittent, alternate day, and extended fasting. It'll have expert advice from people like Dr. Seifried, who I talked about earlier, Rob Wolf, Mark Sisson, and others. There will also be patient stories, so real people. Dr. Fung has seen well over 1,000 patients in his clinic, putting them on some type of a fast. So we'll sprinkle those throughout the book as well. And get this, my publisher said, so we need like 50 recipes for this fasting book. And I went, what? It's a fasting book. Okay, we have hot water, we have lukewarm water, we have cold water. I mean, well, what do you do for recipes? I said, let's try for 10. So we have like bone broth and kombucha and different kinds of recipes in there. Recipes for a fasting book, yeah. Thank you very much.